Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Camille had never been accused of being normal. Normal people didn't haul cargo through the ass end of the galaxy for a living. Normal people didn't fall asleep in security checkpoints with their boots propped on their duffel bag and their jackets smelling like something died in it. Twice. And normal people definitely, absolutely, under no circumstances whatsoever, used 3 apex predators as a lap blanket. But here we were. Nexus 9 was one of those way stations that tried really hard to be impressive. All gleaming chrome and holographic advertisements, with species from 100 different worlds shuffling through customs like it was the universe's worst airport. Which, to be fair, it kind of was. The air smelled like recycled oxygen, cheap disinfectant, and the quiet desperation of travelers who'd been in transit for too long. Camille sat in the security lounge, slumped in a chair that was designed for something with at least one more spine than humans typically came equipped with. Her eyes were half closed, her head tilted back, and her lap was occupied by 3 sleeping Felnra cubs. For those who don't spend their days cruising through the galactic trade routes, here's the situation. Felnra are what happens when evolution takes a big cat, a wolf, and a nightmare, then decides to get really creative. They're sleek, powerful, and covered in bioluminescent markings that pulse with their moods. Their claws are retractable, sure, but when they're out, they can slice through hull plating like it's tissue paper. Their teeth are designed for tearing, their muscles are designed for killing, and their reputation is designed to make every other species in the galaxy check their locks twice before bed. And these 3? They were sprawled across Camille like oversized house cats, purring loud enough to rattle her ribcage. The largest one had its head on her left thigh, drooling on her cargo pants. The middle one was curled against her stomach, one paw twitching in whatever dream predators have. The smallest was tucked under her right arm, making tiny chirping sounds every time it exhaled. They were, objectively speaking, adorable. They were also, objectively speaking, capable of ripping her throat out before she could blink. The security scanner kept beeping. It had been beeping for about 10 minutes now, increasingly frantic little chirps that suggested the machine was having some kind of existential crisis. Camille ignored it. She was good at ignoring things. It was practically a survival skill at this point. What she couldn't ignore was the Quilvan security officer who had been staring at her for the past 5 minutes, like she'd grown a second head. Velmara was tall, which wasn't saying much since Quilvan were all tall. Skinny as a rail, covered in iridescent feathers that shifted between blue and green depending on the light, with eyes the size of dinner plates and a beak that appeared capable of opening a can. Her species was prey-oriented, which meant she had about 16 different ways to say, "I'm terrified," with just her body language, and right now she was using all of them. Her tablet was clutched in both hands, well, talons, and she kept glancing between it, Camille, and the cubs, like she was waiting for someone to yell, "Gotcha," and admit this was all a prank. That didn't happen. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of awkward silence punctuated by scanner beeps and predator purrs, Velmara cleared her throat. It came out as kind of a squawk. Excuse me, human. Camille, ma'am." Camille cracked one eye open. "Yeah?" Velmara's feathers ruffled. I need to ask you some questions about your cargo." "They're not cargo," Camille said, closing her eye again. "Your companions? Closer. Your—" Velmara consulted her tablet, which was now flashing red warning symbols like a disco ball having a seizure. "Your lethal organisms?" "That's rude, but technically accurate. The officer made a noise that was somewhere between a whimper and a sneeze. "Ma'am, my scanner is registering 3 Class 5 predatory life forms in immediate proximity to your person. Protocol requires that I verify their containment status, vaccination records, and transport permits. It also requires that I maintain a minimum safe distance of 15 meters, which I am, not doing, because you're sitting in the middle of the lounge, with them, on you." "They're sleeping," Camille said. Like this explained everything. "They're Felnra." Also true. Velmara's beak clicked shut, with an audible snap. She turned her head around the lounge, as if hoping another officer would materialize and take over this nightmare of a conversation. That didn't happen either. She was on her own. She took a step closer. The scanner's beeping intensified. One of the cubs, the middle one, yawned, showing off a mouth full of teeth that belonged in a horror movie. Velmara froze. "Ma'am," she said, voice strangled, "aren't they... I mean, don't you think aren't they heavy?" Camille opened both eyes this time, gazing down at the 3 predators sprawled across her lap. The largest one had started drooling more enthusiastically, leaving a wet spot the size of a dinner plate on her pants. The smallest one had wrapped both paws around her forearm, clinging like its life depended on it. The middle one was now snoring, a low rumbling sound that vibrated through her entire body. She met Velmara's eyes. "Not anymore," she said. Velmara blinked, all 3 sets of eyelids. "What does that mean?" "Means I got used to it." "You got used to it, to carrying apex predators around like they're pets." "They're not pets," Camille said, and there was something in her voice now, something hard. "They're family." The scanner beeped again, more insistent. Velmara's tablet chimed with what was probably an alert, suggesting she evacuate the entire sector and call in a hazmat team. The officer appeared to be seriously considering it. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to explain how you came to be in possession of 3 Felnra cubs, why they're not in containment, and why, in the name of every god in every pantheon across the galaxy, they are sleeping on you like you're their mother." Camille sighed. It was the sigh of someone who'd been asked to explain something complicated and was really, really tired. But she shifted slightly, careful not to wake the cubs, and gestured to the empty chair across from her. "You might want to sit down," she said. "It's kind of a long story." Velmara didn't sit. She did, however, lower her tablet slightly. "I have time." 3 weeks ago," Camille began, "I was doing a routine cargo run to the outer Danthu sector. You know it?" "No." "Good. Don't go there. It's a garbage heap. Anyway, I stopped at this depot to pick up a shipment. Supposed to be machine parts, nothing exciting. But when I got there, the dock supervisor was acting weird, twitchy, kept checking over his shoulder like he expected something to jump out at him." One of the cubs shifted, pressing closer to Camille's side. She absently moved her hand to rest on its back, fingers scratching behind what might generously be called an ear. "He told me one of the containers was problematic," she continued. "Offered me triple rate to take it off his hands, no questions asked. I'm not stupid. Triple rate for no questions means something illegal, dangerous, or both. But I was broke, my ship needed repairs, and I figured, how bad could it be?" Velmara's feathers had gone completely flat against her body. "How bad was it?" Camille smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who'd stared into the abyss, and the abyss had tried to eat her face. "Real bad," she said. "Want to hear what happened next?" The officer's tablet beeped again. The cubs kept sleeping. And somewhere in the depths of Nexus 9, Alarms that hadn't been noticed yet were starting to sound. 3 weeks earlier, Camille had been standing in front of a cargo container that was making sounds. Bad sounds. The kind of sounds that made you want to turn around, get back on your ship, and pretend you'd never heard them in the first place. Scratching, growling, and underneath it all, something that might have been whimpering if you were feeling generous, or the prelude to your own violent death if you were being realistic. The depot was one of those places that existed in the cracks of civilization, too far out for proper oversight, too profitable for anyone to shut down. The kind of place where you didn't ask questions and people didn't volunteer answers. The lighting was bad, the ventilation was worse, and everything smelled like rust and regret. The dock supervisor, a squat, six-limbed creature whose species Camille had never bothered to learn, was hovering nearby, all his eyes fixed on the container like it might explode at any moment. "So," Camille said, arms crossed, "you want to? Tell me what's in there." "Salvage," the supervisor said quickly. Too quickly. "Salvage doesn't growl." "Sometimes it does." "Not like that. It doesn't." The supervisor's eyes swiveled in different directions, a nervous tick. "Triple rate. Cash. No manifest entry. You take it, you leave. We never had this conversation." Camille should have walked away. She knew it then, and she definitely knew it now, standing in Nexus 9 with 3 predators drooling on her. But back then, in that moment, with her ship's engine making concerning noises and her credit account making even more concerning ones, she'd done what humans have been doing since the dawn of time when faced with obviously terrible decisions. She'd said yes. "Fine," she'd told the supervisor. "But if something jumps out of there and eats me, I'm haunting you." "Acceptable," the supervisor had said, which should have been her second clue that this was a spectacularly bad idea. Her first clue had been the smell. When the container door opened, remotely, because she wasn't completely suicidal, the stench hit her like a physical force. Blood, waste, fear, and something else, something wild and desperate that made her hindbrain scream at her to run. She didn't run. Instead, she grabbed a high-powered light and peered inside. 3 pairs of eyes stared back at her from the darkness. Eyes that glowed with bioluminescent fury, set in faces that were all teeth and rage. The cubs were crammed in the back corner of the container, hissing and spitting, covered in their own filth and what appeared to be injuries from fighting each other. They were small. That was her first coherent thought. Compared to adult Felnra, which could take down a hull breach with their bare claws, these were practically babies. Maybe the size of a large dog, if dogs had retractable claws, and an attitude problem that could be seen from space. They were also starving. She could see their ribs through their fur, see the way they moved, jerky, uncoordinated, desperate. The largest one lunged forward, snapping at the air between them. Its claws scraped against the metal floor, leaving gouges. The sound echoed through the depot like a promise of violence. Camille had stepped back, sealed the container, turned to the supervisor. "How long have they been in there?" The supervisor's eyes scattered in every direction except toward her. "Not my problem anymore." "How long?" "Maybe 3 weeks? 4? They were already inside when the container arrived. Abandoned shipment. Previous owner is, no longer reachable." "Because they're dead? Or because they're hiding?" "Yes." Camille had wanted to punch something, preferably the supervisor, but she'd settled for the wall instead. Her knuckles came away bloody, which seemed appropriate. "They're going to die," she'd said. "Not my problem." "You're a real piece of work, you know that?" The supervisor had shrugged, with at least 4 of his limbs. Triple rate is in your account. Container is loaded. Have a safe trip. And that had been that. Camille had spent the first 3 days of the journey trying very hard not to think about the cargo hold. She'd sealed the container in the hold, set up a camera feed so she could monitor it, and tried to go about her business like she didn't have 3 dying predators on her ship. It didn't work. The camera feed showed her things she didn't want to see. The cubs fighting over scraps that didn't exist. The smallest one getting weaker, moving less. The largest one pacing in circles, its bioluminescent markings pulsing with stress patterns that even Camille's limited knowledge recognized as bad news. On the 4th day, she'd cracked. She'd used her ship's robotic cargo arms, the ones designed for moving heavy freight, to maneuver food into the container. Protein packs, water, basic nutrients. The arms had been designed for precision work, and she'd needed every bit of that precision to avoid the snapping jaws and slashing claws of 3 very angry, very scared cubs. The largest one had destroyed the first protein pack before eating any of it. Just ripped it apart in a frenzy, spraying its contents across the container walls. The middle one had snatched a second pack and retreated to a corner, growling at the others. The smallest one hadn't moved at all. That was when Camille had done something truly stupid. She'd opened the container door, just a crack, and reached in with her bare hand to push a water packet toward the smallest cub. The largest cub had been on her in a heartbeat. Claws out, teeth bared, moving faster than something that starved should have been able to move. If she hadn't yanked her arm back and slammed the door, she would have lost it. As it was, she'd gotten away with 3 deep scratches across her forearm and a healthy reminder that Felnra cubs were still Felnra. She'd bandaged the wounds, stared at the camera feed, and made a decision that would change everything. If food wasn't enough, she'd needed to figure out what was. That night, Camille had pulled up every file she could find on Felnra biology, behavior, and psychology. Most of it was academic stuff, dry and clinical. But buried in the research papers and xenobiology reports, she'd found something interesting. Felnra were pack hunters, not just physically, but psychologically. They had a limited form of telepathy that worked within family units, what they called a pride. It wasn't mind-reading, exactly, more like emotional resonance. They could sense each other's intentions, fears, and needs. Cubs learned this sense from their parents. Without that connection, without that pride structure, they became unstable, aggressive, self-destructive. The files had been very clear on this point. Felnra cubs separated from their pride had a survival rate measured in weeks. They didn't just die from starvation or neglect. They died from loneliness. "Well," Camille had said to the empty cockpit, "that's just great." She'd looked at the camera feed again. The smallest cub was lying on its side now, barely breathing. The other 2 had stopped fighting and were huddled together, which was apparently a bad sign. Camille had rubbed her face with both hands. She'd thought about her options. She'd thought about how spectacularly this could go wrong. Then she'd gone down to the cargo hold, opened the container door, and sat down just outside it. The cubs had hissed at her. The largest one had positioned itself between her and the others, hackles raised, ready to attack. She'd ignored them. Instead, she'd pulled out a protein pack, opened it, and started eating. Slowly, deliberately, keeping her movements calm and her body language as non-threatening as possible. The cubs had watched her with those glowing eyes, confused and wary. She'd finished eating, pulled out another pack, tossed it gently into the container, not toward any specific cub, just into the middle of the space. Then she'd waited. It had taken hours. hours of sitting there, aching and exhausted, while the cubs decided whether she was a threat or not. The largest one had been the first to move, snatching the protein pack and retreating. But it hadn't eaten right away. It had watched her, testing, waiting for her to do something aggressive. She hadn't. She'd just sat there, breathing slowly, projecting every ounce of calm she could manage. Eventually, the cub had eaten. The next night, she'd done it again. And the night after that. Each time getting a little closer to the container, staying a little longer. By the end of the first week, she'd been sitting inside the container with them. By the end of the second week, they'd stopped trying to kill her. And by the time she'd arrived at Nexus 9, 3 weeks in, something impossible had happened. The cubs had accepted her as pride. Standing in the security lounge now, with Velmara staring at her like she'd grown tentacles, Camille finished her story with a shrug. "So, yeah," she said, "that's how I got used to the wait." Velmara's tablet had stopped beeping. The officer's feathers had gone from flat with fear to puffed with something else. Disbelief, maybe, or awe. "That's—" Velmara started, then stopped, started again. "That's not possible. Felnra don't bond with other species. It's biologically impossible. The telepathic connection is species-specific." "Yeah," Camille said. "That's what the files said, too." "Then how—" "Beats me," Camille interrupted. "Maybe they were desperate enough that they didn't care what species I was. Maybe humans are weird enough that we can fake it. Or maybe, and this is my personal theory, nobody ever actually tried before, because everyone else in the galaxy is too smart to do something this stupid." One of the cubs yawned, stretching its legs and digging its claws gently into Camille's thigh. Not enough to hurt, just enough to anchor itself. The bioluminescent markings along its spine pulsed with a slow, contented rhythm. Velmara stared at it, then at Camille, then at her tablet, which was now displaying a priority alert. "We have a problem," the officer said quietly. "Another one? The station commander wants to see you. Now. And he's bringing the Felnra attaché." Camille sighed again, longer this time. "Of course he is," she said. "Of course he is." Station Commander Woolneth was built like a tank that had been crossbred with a small mountain. His species, the Makwi, had evolved on a high-gravity world where everything was trying to kill everything else, and they'd responded by becoming essentially unkillable themselves. He had thick, gray hide that could stop most small arms fire, a horn that could punch through bulkheads, and the kind of presence that made people instinctively move out of his way. When he walked into the security lounge, followed by what appeared to be half the station's security force, Camille didn't move. Mostly because moving would have required waking up the cubs, and that seemed like a bad idea given how many weapons were currently pointed in her general direction. Woolneth stopped about 3 meters away, which Camille appreciated. His small eyes, small relative to his massive head anyway, swept over the scene with the kind of assessment that came from decades of dealing with galactic nonsense. "So," he said, voice like gravel being poured into a cement mixer, "you're the human with the Felnra problem." "I prefer to think of it as a Felnra solution," Camille said. One of his eyes twitched. It might have been amusement. It might have been an aneurysm. With Makwi, it was hard to tell. "Velmara says they're sleeping on you." "Yep. She also says you claim they've bonded with you." "That's the situation, yeah?" "That's impossible. And yet." Camille gestured at her lap, where 3 apex predators were currently drooling and snoring in various combinations. Woolneth took a step closer, and every weapon in the room tracked the movement. The commander raised one massive hand in a stopping gesture, and the security team lowered their arms fractionally. Not all the way. Just enough to suggest they weren't about to open fire immediately. "I've been station commander for 18 cycles," Woolneth said. "I've seen a lot of things. Smugglers, terrorists, pirates, the occasional interdimensional incident that we don't talk about. But I have never, in all that time, seen a human traveling with Felnra cubs who appear to have adopted her as their pride mother." "There's a first time for everything," Camille said. "Not for this." Woolneth's voice had gone flat. "This doesn't happen. Can't happen. Felnra bonding is telepathic. You're human. You don't have the biology for it. Maybe I'm special. Or maybe you're using some kind of technology. Pheromones, neural manipulation. Something that's making these cubs docile enough to fake a bond." Camille felt something shift in her chest. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was colder than that. "You think I'm drugging them?" "I think I'm looking at something that violates every xenobiological principle we have on record, and I need to determine whether it's a miracle or a crime." The largest cub stirred, picking up on Camille's emotional shift even in sleep. Its markings pulsed faster, shifting from the gentle blue of contentment toward the yellow of alertness. She forced herself to breathe slowly, deliberately, until the cub settled again. Woolneth noticed. His eyes narrowed. "Station protocol for unverified predators is euthanasia," he said quietly. "I can't let you leave until we've confirmed these cubs are safe, stable, and legally yours, which means I need someone who actually knows Felnra to examine them." "And let me guess," Camille said. "You've got someone in mind. Already here." The lounge doors opened again, and Camille got her first look at Ambassador Lunkavi. The Felnra were impressive in holos and recordings, but seeing one in person was something else entirely. Lunkavi was easily 2 meters tall at the shoulder, moving with the kind of fluid grace that suggested she could go from standing still to lethal violence in the space between heartbeats. Her fur was a deep gray blue, marked with bioluminescent patterns that were far more complex than the cub's. They swirled and shifted across her body like living art, currently displaying what Camille's limited knowledge suggested was formal diplomatic patterns. Her face was all elegant angles and deadly promise. Eyes that could probably see in about 16 more spectrums than human ones. Ears that tracked every sound in the room independently. And teeth. So many teeth. She looked at Camille, then at the cubs, then back at Camille. When she spoke, her voice had a resonance to it that Camille could feel in her bones. "You're the human." "I'm a human," Camille corrected. "There are billions of us." "The human who claims to have bonded with Felnra cubs." "I don't claim anything. They bonded with me. I just didn't die from it." Lunkavi's markings shifted, patterns changing in ways that Camille couldn't read. The ambassador moved closer, and Camille fought the urge to tense up. The cubs could sense tension. Tension made them anxious. Anxious cubs with claws were bad for everyone involved. "May I approach?" Lunkavi asked, and there was something in her voice that suggested this was a courtesy, not a request. "They might not like it," Camille warned. "They're not great with strangers." "I am not a stranger. I am Felnra. They will recognize kin." "If you say so." Lunkavi came closer, moving with the kind of deliberate grace that predators use when they're trying not to startle prey. Except in this case, Camille wasn't sure who was prey and who was predator. The ambassador stopped just outside the range where the cubs could reach her without moving, and made a sound in her throat, low, resonant, with harmonics that Camille could barely hear. It was, she realized, a Felnra greeting. something adults used with cubs to establish safety and kinship. The cubs woke up, all three of them, simultaneously, going from dead sleep to full alertness in the space of a heartbeat. The largest one was on its feet immediately, positioning itself between Camille and the newcomer. The middle one had pressed against Camille's side, claws out, but not extended. The smallest one had its ears flat against its head, making a sound that was half hiss, half whimper. Lunkavi made the greeting sound again, louder this time, with more complex harmonics. The largest cub hissed back. Not a greeting, a warning. The ambassador's markings shifted to something that might have been surprise. She took a step back, made a different sound, softer, more questioning. The cubs didn't relax. If anything, they pressed closer to Camille, all three of them vibrating with tension. "Fascinating," Lunkavi said. "They don't recognize me as kin." "I told you they're not great with strangers," Camille said. "You don't understand. They should instinctively recognize another Felnra as safe. It's genetic, hardwired into our biology." The ambassador's eyes fixed on Camille. "But they're not reacting to me as kin. They're reacting to me as a threat to their pride mother." "They're what now?" "You. They see you as their pride mother. They're protecting you from me." Camille blinked. "That's not possible, right? That's what everyone keeps telling me." "And yet," Lunkavi gestured at the cubs, who were still on high alert, still positioned defensively. "May I try something?" "Depends on what it is." "I'm going to send a calming pattern, a telepathic signal that all Felnra cubs respond to. It's instinctive. They can't help but react to it. And if they don't react, then we'll know that their bond with you has overridden their species' instincts, which would be—" The ambassador paused, choosing her words carefully. "Unprecedented." "Go ahead," Camille said. "But if they freak out, I'm blaming you." Lunkavi's markings shifted through a rapid series of patterns, too fast for Camille to follow. The air seemed to thicken somehow, charged with something Camille couldn't quite sense but knew was there. The cubs didn't relax. The largest one's markings flared bright yellow. Aggressive warning. The middle one pressed so close to Camille that she could barely breathe. And the smallest one made a sound that Camille had never heard before. A high-pitched keen that made every hair on her body stand on end. She moved without thinking, hands going to the cubs, touching them, making soothing sounds that weren't words so much as intent. The largest one turned its head to look at her, eyes wild, and she met its gaze steadily, projecting calm the way she'd learned to over the past 3 weeks. Slowly, gradually, the cubs settled. Their markings dimmed from yellow back to blue. The smallest one stopped keening. The largest one sat down, though it kept its eyes on Lunkavi. The ambassador was staring at Camille like she'd just performed magic. "That's not possible," Lunkavi said. "You already said that." "No, you don't understand. I just sent a calming pattern that should have worked on any Felnra cub in the galaxy. It's biological, instinctive. They can't refuse it any more than you can refuse to breathe." "Apparently they can," Camille said. "No." Lunkavi shook her head. "They didn't refuse it. They ignored it, because they were already receiving a calming signal from you. And they trusted yours more than they trusted mine." The lounge had gone completely silent. Even Woolneth looked stunned, which was impressive given that his species had all the emotional range of a brick wall. "But humans can't send telepathic signals," Velmara said from somewhere behind Camille. "That's impossible." "Everything about this is impossible," Lunkavi said. Her markings had shifted to something that looked almost like awe. And yet, here we are, a human who has somehow convinced 3 Felnra cubs that she is their pride mother. Not through telepathy, not through biology, through sheer, stubborn, impossible persistence. "That's our species in a nutshell," Camille said. "We're very good at doing things that shouldn't work." Lunkavi laughed. It was a strange sound, all resonance and harmonics, but it was definitely a laugh. "You taught them to read you instead of connecting to them. You made them learn human instead of learning Felnra. That's either brilliant or insane. Why not both?" The ambassador's markings shifted again, this time to patterns that Camille's research suggested meant respect. "Indeed. Why not both?" She turned to Wulneth. "The bond is real, Commander. Whatever method she used to achieve it, these cubs have genuinely accepted her as pride. They will not survive separation from her." "So what are you saying?" Wulneth asked. "I'm saying that whether we like it or not, whether it makes sense or not, this human is now responsible for 3 Felnra cubs, and we need to discuss what that means." Camille felt something cold settle in her stomach. What means? Lunkavi turned back to her, and there was something in those alien eyes that looked almost like sympathy. "It means," the ambassador said gently, "that your life just got very complicated." Lunkavi led them to a private conference room, away from the crowd that had started gathering in the security lounge. Word traveled fast on a station like Nexus 9, and apparently human with apex predators was the kind of gossip that brought everyone running. The cubs had been reluctant to move, but Camille had convinced them with patience and what she was starting to think of as her extremely limited, telepathy-adjacent skill set. They padded alongside her now, close enough that she kept having to adjust her stride to avoid stepping on them. The conference room was sterile and cold, all smooth surfaces and uncomfortable chairs. Camille sat down carefully, and the cubs immediately arranged themselves around her, largest one at her feet, middle one pressed against her leg, smallest one trying to climb into her lap despite being way too big for it. Wulneth took up a position by the door, arms crossed. Belmara hovered nearby with her tablet, still looking like she expected everything to explode at any moment. And Lunkavi settled into a chair across from Camille, moving with that unsettling grace that suggested sitting was just a polite fiction she was entertaining. "What do you know about the Velnath Pride?" the ambassador asked without preamble. Camille shook her head. "Nothing. Should I?" 3 months ago, there was a political purge on the Felnra homeworld. An entire pride was massacred. Parents, siblings, extended family. The only survivors were 3 cubs who were being transported off-world at the time. Lunkavi's markings had gone dark, almost black. Someone ambushed the transport. The cubs disappeared. We've been searching for them ever since. The cold feeling in Camille's stomach intensified. "Let me guess. These 3 match the genetic markers, DNA, bioluminescent patterns, even the age range. Your cubs aren't just any cubs, Camille. They're the last surviving members of one of the oldest bloodlines on our world. If they die, an entire dynasty dies with them." "That's just fantastic," Camille muttered. She looked down at the smallest cub, who was currently chewing on her sleeve with obvious contentment. "You 3 really don't do anything halfway, do you?" the cub chirped at her. The middle one made a sound that might have been agreement. The largest one just kept watch, eyes scanning the room for threats. "My government has been searching for them," Lunkavi continued. "We feared they were dead. Finding them alive it's a miracle, honestly." but it creates complications. Of course it does. The Velnath line has political significance, cultural significance. These cubs represent more than just themselves. They represent heritage, tradition, a direct link to our ancestral past. The Felnra government will want them returned to the homeworld, properly raised by their own kind, given the education and training befitting their status. Camille felt all three cubs press closer to her, reacting to the tension in her body. She forced herself to breathe, to project calm even though she felt anything but. "And if I say no?" "Can you say no?" Lunkavi's voice was gentle but firm. "You're a cargo hauler, Camille. Your ship is small. Your resources are limited. You live a dangerous life, traveling through sectors where violence is common and safety is expensive. These cubs need stability, protection, a proper pride to teach them what it means to be Felnra." "They have a pride," Camille said quietly. "Me. You're not Felnra." "They don't seem to care." Lunkavi's markings shifted through patterns Camille couldn't read. "No, they don't. And that's what makes this so difficult." Wolneth spoke up from his position by the door. "What's the legal situation?" "Complicated," the ambassador said. "Technically, these cubs are wards of the Felnra government. But Camille saved their lives. Without her intervention, they would be dead. Under galactic salvage law, she has a claim. Under Felnra law, the cubs themselves have a say in their guardianship once they're bonded to a pride. And they've bonded to her," Velmara said, finally speaking up. Her feathers had calmed somewhat, though she still looked ready to bolt at any sudden movement. "Exactly. Which means we have a situation where Felnra law, galactic law, and basic biology are all in conflict with each other." Lunkavi leaned forward. "I can make you an offer, Camille. A compromise. I'm listening. The Felnra government will recognize you as the official guardian of these cubs. We'll provide resources, proper containment for your ship, food supplies, medical support, everything you need to care for them safely. In exchange, you agree to bring them to the homeworld regularly. Let them learn their heritage, meet other Felnra, understand what they are, beyond just being your— what did you call them? Family? That's what they are. Then let them be both. Your family and ours. Let them have the best of both worlds, instead of forcing them to choose." Camille was quiet for a long moment, looking down at the three cubs who had somehow become her responsibility. The largest one met her gaze, golden eyes unblinking. Its markings pulsed slowly, and Camille felt, or maybe just imagined she felt, a sense of trust radiating from it. These cubs had lost everything. Their real family, their home, their entire world. They'd been starved and abandoned and left to die in a cargo container. And somehow, impossibly, they'd found her. Or she'd found them. The order didn't really matter anymore. "What happens if I say no?" she asked. "If I just take them and leave?" "Then you'll be a fugitive," Wolneth said bluntly. "The Felnra government will issue a warrant. Every station, every port, every civilized world will be looking for you. You won't be able to refuel, resupply, or dock anywhere without risking arrest." "And if I say yes to this compromise?" "Then you get to keep them," Lunkavi said. "You'll have the full support of the Felnra embassy. No one will question your right to care for them. You'll even receive a stipend, enough to cover the additional costs of raising 3 apex predators. All we ask is that you don't cut them off from their heritage entirely." It wasn't really a choice. Camille knew that. It was an ultimatum dressed up in diplomatic language. But the thing was, Lunkavi wasn't wrong. These cubs deserved to know where they came from, who they were, what it meant to be Felnra, even if they'd chosen a human as their pride mother. "Okay," Camille said finally. "I'll do it, but on one condition." "Which is?" "They're mine, not the government's, not some political dynasties. Mine. If they want to learn about Felnra culture, fine. But at the end of the day, they come home with me. Their choice, not yours." Lunkavi's markings shifted to something that looked like approval. "Agreed. I'll have the contracts drawn up. You'll need to sign several documents, submit to regular check-ins, and agree to bring them to the homeworld at least twice per standard cycle." "Fine." The ambassador stood, moving to the door where Woolneth waited. But she paused, looking back at Camille and the cubs. "You know," she said, "there's an old Felnra saying, 'The strongest pride is not the one that never falls, but the one that rises together.' These cubs fell. You helped them rise. That makes you stronger than you know." After they left, it was just Camille and the cubs in the quiet conference room. The smallest one had finally managed to climb fully into her lap, despite weighing roughly as much as a bag of concrete. The middle one had draped itself across her feet. The largest one sat at attention, still watching for threats that no longer existed. Belmara poked her head back in. The contracts will be ready in about an hour. You can wait here, or—" "We'll wait," Camille said. The officer nodded and left. Camille looked down at the three predators who had somehow become her family. They looked back at her with those glowing eyes, completely trusting, completely content. "You three are going to be so much trouble," she told them. The largest one made a sound that might have been agreement. The middle one yawned. The smallest one just purred, a rumbling sound that vibrated through her entire body. Later, after the contracts were signed and the officials had finally left them alone, Velmara approached one last time. Her feathers were smooth now, her movements less jittery. "Can I ask you something?" the officer said. "Sure." "Earlier, you said they weren't heavy anymore. What did you mean?" Camille thought about it. About the 3 weeks of fear and frustration and slow, impossible progress. About learning to read creatures that shouldn't be readable. About becoming family with beings that weren't even her species. At first, taking care of them felt impossible, she said, like carrying a weight I couldn't handle. But somewhere along the way, I stopped noticing the weight. Or maybe I just got stronger. Either way, they're not a burden anymore. They're just mine. And I'm theirs. And that doesn't feel heavy at all. Velmara nodded slowly. "That's nice. Kind of beautiful, actually." "Yeah," Camille said, looking down at her sleeping predators. "Yeah, it kind of is." The cubs slept on, dreaming whatever dreams apex predators have when they finally feel safe. And Camille sat there, surrounded by bioluminescent markings and gentle purring, thinking about the strange paths that led to family. Somewhere in the cargo bay, her jacket hung on a hook, stained, torn, and smelling like something had died in it. It was heavier than it used to be, weighed down by responsibility and consequence, and 3 lives that depended on her. But when she thought about it, really thought about it, Camille realized something important. She'd carried worse, and she'd carry this gladly. After all, that's what family was for.